you doing? It's Dyclif here, and welcome to the Dyclif Dygest. We've got a long list of topics in front of us today, so let's go ahead and get into it. We're starting with basketball, and our first story to cover is a rather tragic one. It's Lamar Odom's condition. He was found unconscious at a brothel in Las Vegas, and apparently there's been traces of cocaine and 10 or more sexual performance substances found in his body at the time of him being unconscious. And, you can kind of see how this happened in a way. Now, I think everyone is pretty familiar with Lamar Odom and what he's done. He's Sixth Man of the Year, Los Angeles Lakers. He's played for the Clippers. He's played for a number of NBA teams, but he seems to be a person that is well respected around the league. Multiple people like him as a teammate. But the past few years apparently have been rather downhill for him. I heard recently that a friend of his actually OD'd and died like maybe a week or two before this story broke. So that's another thing. There's no actual news to my knowledge right now about his physical condition, but he is in the hands of Khloe Kardashian, which he's technically still married to right now. I'm not really sure what the outcome of this is going to be, but definitely keep Lamar Odom in your thoughts, and we'll see over the next coming days what happens out of this, and hopefully he somehow recovers from this and gets the help he needs, gets pointed in the right direction, and we'll see what happens from there. But next we have another story that is not really similar, but similar to the fact that it involves an NBA player and there's a problem. So Thabo Sefolosha was found not guilty of basically, I don't know if it was resisting arrest or violent misconduct towards a police officer or what the exact tagline was that he was charged for. But if you don't know, earlier in the year during the playoffs, Thabo Sefolosha was at a New York strip club, I believe, or outside of a New York strip club in what would seem like, maybe a dangerous area at night or early morning. And the NYPD, one of the policemen fractured his leg during this altercation that took place. And he was found not guilty, so what that leads me to believe is maybe the officer involved shouldn't have done what he did. And I heard that there might be some video evidence now of the situation that took place. Not only is this kind of a problem now because, listen, there's been an outbreak of stories about police officers having too much power and what we can do to resolve that problem. I think, and multiple people think, that body cameras should be implemented so that way there's no possible way this can happen again. Nothing like this happens again. The body camera has to be on at all times, unless something happens to make it physically damaged or something. That I can understand, but I think a police officer needs to keep this on them at all times, and it should be recording altercations between an officer and the other person, whoever they may be in a situation. This is where media kind of plays a role, because now an outside force can film a situation happen, whereas in the 90s and below, you didn't have that. You didn't have someone walking around with a camcorder or a video camera able to record altercations. So this really did affect the Atlanta Hawks in the playoffs because they were without Thabo Sefolosha, Antich, and I believe Chris Copeland was involved as well. So, you're without those players, and suddenly there's a different situation. Atlanta was statistically the best team in the Eastern Conference with 60 wins last season, and you got to think how different would the Hawks-Cavs series had been if those players were involved. It's baffling to think that maybe a police officer changed the outcome unknowingly in a basketball series. Like, that's really weird to think about. And you might be thinking, Sefolosha, Antich, and Copeland aren't that good of players. Well, I will say this. Thabo Sefolosha is a guy that can give you a little bit of everything on the floor. He's a nice two-way player, and his defense is outstanding. Nobody was able to really guard LeBron in that series, and Sefolosha is a guy who can play the 2 or the 3 and really give you a helping hand in that area. So, it's really interesting to see what would have happened if he was able to play. But, we'll see what he does. Maybe he sues the NYPD. Maybe he doesn't. We're just going to have to see in the coming days what happens there. The next story is a scandal of sorts, and I'm sure if you're paying attention to college basketball news, you've heard about the Louisville Cardinals men's basketball program is under some fire, and it all comes from a book named Breaking Cardinal Rules, written by Dick Caddy and Katina Powell. Now, if you're unaware of this story, basically a man by the name of Andre McGee, and this is all allegations, a man by the name of Andre McGee who held a higher position, a recruiter of sorts at Louisville, hired escorts, Katina Powell, and apparently, according to the book, Katina Powell's close group of escorts as well as her children were involved in this, and I believe that Katina Powell is a little over 42 years old. I don't know the exact number. But, so basically what you have here is a small prostitution ring recruiting players to go to Louisville. And if that truly is the case, what should be the punishment for that, and to what extent? Now, I think, for the people that are denying this altogether, I'm not so sure about that, because you have the author of the book who has done his research. He's a very renowned author in the community. He wouldn't just put his name out on this and it not be legitimate to some degree. Dick Caddy has said that the confines of the book, the gist of the book, is 100% real. Now, the other stuff, like maybe the children being involved and other stuff like that, has not been proven. Actually, nothing's been proven yet. But you got to think in your head that this has some legitimacy to it. So we'll see what happens over the course of I don't even know how long this is going to take, to be honest with you. The NCAA is going to have to investigate quite a bit, ask recruits, ask not really parents, but ask recruits to, back until like 2009 or something, however long Andre McGee's been there and however long Katina Powell claims this has happened. Now, some believe Rick Pitino knew about this, some believe he didn't. Personally, if I had to say, there's no way that he knew about it, because this is something that's just so out there, and Rick Pitino's been on record of saying about this situation that none of his current players, none of his coaching staff, no one within his general engagement knew about this. So it's hard for me to believe that he actually knew anything about this. But we'll see what happens over the next couple months and whatnot. But this is a very interesting situation that has occurred in Louisville. And quite frankly, we're just going to have to see what happens. But that's the end of the basketball segment. We'll be moving on to football next. Let's take a break. Hello and welcome back to the Dyclif Dygest. We have a few topics in football to cover. The first one being sort of a small comeback story. It has been reported that Josh Gordon is now thriving for an NFL comeback. As you know, he's had back-to-back suspensions for the use of marijuana, and it would be a shame to see two suspensions ruin the career of one of the top wide receivers in the league. When he got suspended, it's arguable that he was a top 5 receiver. Like, there's no doubt about it. You could honestly say he's maybe top 3 in 2013 and early 14. So it's nice to see him making a comeback and posting these progress pics, I guess you can say. And I got to say, he looks to be in shape, and I'm definitely excited for his comeback, and I'm also excited to see what team pursues him and actually gives him that second chance. Next, we have Nick Chubb, the Georgia running back who got injured, and he is now out for the rest of the season. And this is just one of those reminders that I want to say. This guy was projected first round, maybe second round pick, and now he's injured. Probably might have to return to school, I would say. But right here's what I'm getting at with this. I think there needs to be some sort of insurance policy in place for student athletes. Because when you take into consideration that they don't get paid, except for the fact they have a scholarship to go to school, that's the only positive that student athletes have, is either a free ride through college or a substantially less amount of money to pay due to a scholarship. So when you take that in consideration, I think these athletes who are playing for a school in the NCAA should be covered to some degree, because they are attracting fans, they are attracting people around the world to watch them, depending on the sport. But still, I want to make a point for all student athletes out there. There needs to be some sort of insurance in place. And also, you could honestly debate whether or not student athletes should be paid, because it's a legitimate claim now. Like, people are progressing forward and they see this change, and where they're like, well, back then they didn't get paid, so why should they now? There's a couple arguments you can say. I'm not going to say all of them per se in this particular segment, but basically, when it comes down to it, the NCAA is benefiting off of not only the players playing in the game on televised events, but they're also benefiting off of fan shops using their jersey numbers, not their names, but their numbers that they associate themselves with. And quite frankly, I see that as a minor problem. I think you have to give the athlete some credit in that. They've built their name, and you're just kind of taking that away from them. And there's a couple of ways that this can happen, student athletes being paid. There are such a thing as boosters, and right now the top programs in their desired field of sport are putting in money through their facilities and their head coaching staff, or just coaching staff in general, when part of that could be going to the players. This was brought up by Bomani Jones lately, saying, well, okay, what if let's say you're paying a head coach $6 million. Well, okay, that's how much the team's worth. You break up the $6 million from the head coach. Not literally. You don't take the $6 million that the coach is making, but you take $6 million, that's your salary to work with for the team, and you sort of pay players based on what you think their abilities are and stuff like that. Now, to whether or not there'd be a big issue with contracts and paying players would be sophisticated, and I'm sure it can be handled. But it's a thought. It's a theory that could work. Either way, back to Nick Chubb. I think there needs to be some sort of insurance policy in place. That's all I'm saying. There's still a lot the NCAA could do to improve. Like, this is only the beginning. Like, you don't understand. I feel like I need to become president of the NCAA or something. But moving on, we have a referee, a side judge, to be specific, that has been suspended by the NFL during the Thursday night game between the Steelers and Chargers. And, it's kind of weird because there really hasn't been a report on this yet. The NFL have just said that the side judge has been suspended with pay. And I don't know really what to make of that, because I know it's their job to notice clock errors, but in a way, to some degree, isn't it the clock operator's duty to stop the clock? It's just an opinion. Like, I feel like the clock operator is hired by the stadium, I believe, but isn't the clock operator affiliated with the NFL in some way? It's kind of weird. It's clock operator working for a specific team, not necessarily the NFL, but the team's part of the NFL. It's a weird way to go about it, but I still think they're within the guidelines of the NFL. So, maybe the clock operator should have some sort of penalty here instead of the side judge. That's just my opinion. I don't know if I'm looking at this wrong or right or what, but I still think to some degree, someone that operates a scoreboard / clock, I don't know if they break those duties up anymore, but you get what I'm saying. I don't know, quite frankly. But now to one of the main headlines of the week, and that is basically my picks for this week's NFL games. Obviously, the Falcons-Saints game is over, and let me talk about that really quick. What a performance by the Saints. They were 1-4. They really needed the win at home, and they got the win versus an undefeated Falcons team. Now, for those of you that say the Falcons have just had a weak schedule, I'll agree with you to some extent, but you got to give them a little bit of credit here. Opening the season 5-0 is nothing to laugh at all. It's an undefeated record. But, the division is arguably weak, and they're simply shining above the rest. That's about it. But the Saints played one heck of a game. Ingram has been consistent this season for the Saints. Breeze hasn't really, but this game got him back on track. I believe he had a passer percentage rating of over 76 or 77% in this one, and had well over 300 yards. So that's a good sign for Saints fans everywhere. You had offensive threats such as Snead and Cooks getting involved. It was an overall good game for the Saints. Their defense stepped up in this one, and it's really interesting to see what's going to happen moving forward with that one. But right here are my picks of the week, and this is going in order of when the games will be played. So to start off with, we have the Bengals at the Bills. This is going to be a very interesting game. I have the score 23-16 in favor of the Bengals. I think the Bengals are undefeated, and when you take a composite rating, I'm talking offense, defense, and special teams. I give the Bengals an A- in offense, an A- in defense, and a B+ in special teams right now. When you talk about the offensive game, you have Andy Dalton, who's on fire. You have the running game, which is really good. The receiving game's solid. The all-around defense is good. They're getting sacks. They have a decent secondary. They're punting extremely well, and they're making their field goals when they count. That is a very good composite rating, and I would believe that it would be one of the best in the league. Like, the Bengals might not be the best team, but I think they have the composite rating to possibly be that best team, if you know what I mean. They just need to get over a hump, and we'll see what happens. I think 23-16, this is going to be a defensive effort. Some fantasy players to look out for. I'm not so sure about the Bills' running back situation with Carlos Williams and LaShawn McCoy, who's going to be healthy, and if it's going to matter versus the Bengals' defense. When you have Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill, who are healthy, and you have the Bengals, who's on fire, versus Buffalo, who's been kind of up and down. I truly see their potential. I really do. But I just don't know with Tyrod Taylor possibly being not really questionable. I think he's going to play. But, I don't know how healthy he's going to be. If Sammy Watkins, I haven't really heard much from him this season. Really, the Bills' defense is going to have to pull through in this one, and I don't know if it's going to happen. So I have the Bengals in that. Next, we have the Bears and Lions, and anytime that a lion and a bear plays, it's kind of funny because the Wizard of Oz. So I have the Lions favored in this one. They are at home, 16-13. I believe the Lions' effort versus the Seahawks showed something. The Bears' offense is decent, and their defense is a little on the low side of the league, in my opinion. The Lions' defense is relatively good. Matthew Stafford hasn't been as consistent, but I expect him to step it up a little bit this week at home. I predict a pretty low-scoring affair, but you never know what can happen, really. This is just my point of view and my opinion. Fantasy players to look out for in this one. Alshon Jeffrey, if he plays again. Really, Martellus Bennett, I don't see him doing too much, but he might be one of the main targets for the Bears because I think the Lions are going to be able to shut down receivers. So maybe dumping it off low is the Bears' way to go for the offensive game. And on the other side, the Lions, I think Calvin Johnson has himself a week. I think he finally gets over 100 yards and he finally breaks out of this, not really a slump, but he finally has his sort of breakout game to get him going. Next, we have the Vikings and the Chiefs, and I said that backwards. It's Chiefs at Vikings. I have the Vikings winning 24-16. The Jamal Charles injury really hurt the Chiefs on this one, and I don't see anyone really stepping up. I think West, who's been implemented now, along with Niles Davis, will be getting carries. I don't know who's going to get the bulk of the carries, but we'll see what happens with that. The Chiefs have not been really successful when it comes to receiving at all. They went without a touchdown for quite some time until Jeremy Maclin broke that. You have Kelsey, who could be a threat in this game, as well as Maclin, but I don't see too much from them. The Vikings, I feel, are I would consider them a mediocre team in this league, like right smack dab in the middle. And I just believe they have the pieces and what it takes to win this game. The personnel. And really, this is the one game where I'm not sure to give you a fantasy player to look out for, besides maybe AP, obviously. That's about it. Like, I wouldn't necessarily go with anyone else in this game if I had them on my roster. Next, we have the Jets and the Panthers. And, the Redskins at the Jets. I looked at that wrong. I was about to say, I don't think that's right. Redskins at Jets. And this one, I could see being a slugfest, but as well as a relatively high-scoring game. So I have the Jets with 27 and the Redskins at 17. The Redskins haven't really been performing that well this season. They've been mediocre, like the Vikings in a way, but maybe a little bit less. But when you have Alfred Morris, who has kind of disappeared, RG3, who's been injured and disappearing, and you have Kirk Cousins, who's stepping up to the plate, and you have Deshaun Jackson, who hasn't played maybe but 20 minutes, if that. I actually think it was like 5 minutes, to be honest with you. So 5 minutes from Deshaun Jackson, one of your best wide receivers. I just think the Jets have this one. They have a pretty decent offense in Chris Ivory and Brandon Marshall, along with a few other threats like Eric Decker. They have a good enough offense with Ron Fitzpatrick at quarterback. He doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. He's more of a methodical pass completion kind of guy, and you have a really good defense for the Jets. I don't see any particular reason they don't come away with the win in this one. So, a few players to look out for: Chris Ivory, Brandon Marshall, and I really think that's about it. Obviously, the Jets' defense. If I mention a defense that's going to play well, just automatically link that to fantasy as well. Now we have the Panthers at Seahawks. So the Panthers are not playing the Jets, just to repeat that. Panthers at Seahawks. This one's going to be a relatively interesting one. We have Carolina, who is undefeated, and the Seahawks, who very well could be 1-4 at this point in the season if they didn't pick up that win against Detroit. Controversially, might I add. I believe in this one you have the 12th man behind Seattle, and I think they're going to get the win 27-13. They're finally going to get back to form. The Panthers, I don't know how they're 5-0. I get they're a solid team. You have Cam Newton, but realistically, his wide receivers since Benjamin went down have been Ted Ginn and Kevin Funchess, the rookie. And, of course, Greg Olsen, who's been the hero of the receiving corps. So, basically what you have is, in my opinion, maybe a top 18 defense or top 18 offense in the league with Carolina. I'll give them 16, 17, whatever on any given week. You have a very good defense in Carolina, arguably one of the top 3 in the league right now statistically. And then you have the Seahawks defense mixed with their offense. I just believe Russell Wilson, even though his offensive line has been questionable, and this could link to Jimmy Graham. He's not the blocking tight end type. He's more of a receiver, and he's stated that very clearly in his career. So maybe that could be one issue, but I still think he scrambles so much to make plays that it doesn't even matter. He's just so quick and nifty in the pocket that I believe that the Seahawks will finally get going this week. And I think the fantasy players to watch out for really, in my opinion, maybe be the Seahawks defense. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but really that's about it. I don't see anyone really breaking out this game. It's going to be back and forth. Seahawks will have the advantage home field, and maybe their offense will be a little bit better, and Carolina's more efficient. That's about what I see. Next, we have the Chargers at Packers. And this is going to be interesting because these are two of my favorite quarterbacks, two of my top 5 favorite quarterbacks, really, going at each other. We have Phillip Rivers and Aaron Rodgers. I have the Packers staying undefeated with a 34-24 win. And really, I think that sums up the game. Pretty offensive. Both defenses are relatively good. I'll give them that. But I think Phillip Rivers gets his fair share, upwards of 300 yards, maybe 2 TDs. Rodgers, maybe 3 TDs, 325 yards, maybe. I don't know. But anyways, Packers have so many weapons on offense, mainly due to Aaron Rodgers' mind. He's just an absolute catalyst when it comes to creating plays. But you have Randall Cobb, who's probable. He's going to play, I would imagine, unless something crazy happens. James Jones. Richard Rodgers has actually been sort of a threat, a low-key threat for that offense. And the Chargers have weapons too. Phillip Rivers now has Antonio Gates back. Gates did perform very well against the Steelers. You have Keenan Allen, who's been kind of up and down this season, but I think he'll have a decent week. And, of course, you have Melvin Gordon and Danny Woodhead to look out for. But, yeah, I still think the Packers get the win. Obviously, look out for Phillip Rivers, Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to say Melvin Gordon has a decent week, so look out for him, as well as basically the Packers receiving core. So that's about all I have to say. Next, we have the Broncos at the Browns, and I think this is going to be interesting. We have the Browns, who have been pretty good lately due to Josh McCown, but how are they going to do against one of the best defenses in the league right now? The Broncos are undefeated, and it's really, they've had a tough time with a few teams. And I will say, Peyton Manning's had his struggles this season, but I think this is the time where he needs to step it up and really show what he's made of, show what he has left. He has Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders as his key weapons. Owen Daniels, who hasn't really shown up much in terms of the box score this season. And you have the Browns, on the other hand, when you have Josh McCown, Travis Benjamin, Isaiah Crowell, and the tight end Gary Barnidge, who has had back-to-back weeks of just explosiveness. I still have the Broncos beating the Browns 31-10. I know that's a pretty big margin, but I think this is just a week that the Broncos really show and really click who they are on both sides of the field. I just think they got it this week. Obviously, the players to look out for are who I literally mentioned, but I would not start any of the Browns players, maybe besides Crowell, just because they're going to have to go with the run game at some point. But, Josh McCown's been pretty good. I believe he had a career day last time out against the Ravens, or was it against? I think it was against the Ravens. Next, we have the Texans at the Jaguars, and this one I believe is going to be a low-scoring affair. Most people are going to be poking fun at this game, saying these are the two worst teams in the league, but maybe not. The Texans have been relatively bad lately, but I think Arian Foster is a guy to watch out for, and that's about it. On the Jags side, there's a few more to look out for. We have Blake Bortles, who has not been bad at all. He's actually been relatively good lately. You have the Jaguars' defense, who's been decent of late. And you have Allen Hurns, who has showed up the past couple weeks out of what would seem to be nowhere. So you have a few efficient options in this game to play fantasy-wise, but I have the Jaguars winning 19-13. I think the defenses will show. The Texans' defense is pretty good. The Jags' defense is probably right there with them. I think the Jaguars get the win at home. I think they really want it, and we'll see what happens. Next, we have the Dolphins at Titans. This one is a tough one to call, but I think given the circumstances with the Dolphins letting Mike Philman go and having a new coach implement maybe a little bit of new plays, new system, not too much, but you get what I'm saying. I still favor the Titans at home. Mariota's been decent. It's arguable that the Titans haven't been using him like he is capable of, but it should be interesting to see what happens over the course of the rest of the season with him. But in this one, again, I don't really see anybody really standing out fantasy-wise, to be honest with you. I wouldn't start anybody in this game if I had them necessarily. Not even the running backs that are involved. I don't know who's going to get the touchdowns. Somebody's going to have to get the touchdowns. I don't know who it's going to be, but I'm predicting 23-16 Titans. Next, we have the Cardinals at Steelers, and the Cardinals could easily be undefeated right now if they did not lose to the Rams, so I think they're going to be hungry for another win and to actually prove that they are still an elite team and that wasn't a fluke. I actually believe it because Carson Palmer has been outstanding this season along with Arizona's trio of running backs. Andre Ellington's now back into circulation along with David Johnson and Chris Johnson. So you have a trio of running backs who have all been relatively good. And then you have Larry Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd, who's just been there to sort of balance out Larry for maybe a few catches. And not to mention the Cardinals' defense has been one of the top 5 in the league statistically. The Steelers' Big Ben might play in this one, which could affect the outcome of the game minorly. I still think the Cardinals win 31-17. If indeed Ben Roethlisberger plays, then it's going to be pretty interesting to see different fantasy outputs because you have Martavius Bryant, who's now playing, as well as Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, the usual cast. So basically every player that I mentioned is someone to watch out for. But if you are going to start an Arizona running back, I really don't know what to tell you because I think they're all going to get shared snaps. But if you had to pick one, you absolutely have to, I would say Chris Johnson is your man. Next, we have the Ravens at 49ers. I believe this one's going to finish 27-17. The 49ers just don't have it this season. I know what it is. You have just a list of problems. You have a head coach departing ways with the team. You have a number of suspensions from last season and just the complete breakdown of their roster. Their defense isn't the same. Their offense isn't the same. You have Kaepernick, who hasn't been really showing up hardly at all lately. And on the other side, you have the Ravens, who have a solid defense. You have Joe Flacco, Steve Smith, who is questionable to play, and you have Aiken, who has been very good of late. And not to mention Justin Forsett, who earlier in the year was struggling a bit, maybe due to the offense changing in some ways, but now they're starting to really give him the carries that he deserves, and he's showing why he is the number 1 back in Baltimore and why he is a fantasy option. So I believe the Ravens get this win with or without Steve Smith. And the 49ers, on the other hand, players to maybe look out for: Carlos Hyde. The Ravens do tend to give up a little bit on the ground, I will say that much. So, just look out for it. Next, we have the Patriots at the Colts, and this one is certainly going to be a headline game. I'm going to watch it. I'm assuming most of America that's interested in football is going to watch it. I believe that the last 4 games the Patriots have played against the Colts, they have scored over 40 points. I'm staying somewhat true to that. I'm going to say they scored 38, and the Colts are going to have 17. I picked 17 for them because I didn't know if Andrew Luck was playing or not, so that seemed like a safe number. If Andrew Luck does play, I expect a decently big game out of him due to the fact that he's got to stop this Patriot madness that has happened to the Colts lately. And it's not like he doesn't have weapons either. You know, you have Frank Gore, Andre Johnson, T.Y. Hilton. He's got the playable options around him, but the Patriots have just been on another level. Their defense has been above average, not the best, but above average. And you really don't need to say anything about their offense with Tom Brady, Edelman, Gronk, Amendola, Dion Lewis, LeGarrette Blount, and, of course, Bill Belichick, who is probably one of the more important assets to that offense and team in general. So I think this is just going to be a repeat massacre. We don't really have any other statistic to go off of to give the Colts the benefit of the doubt at all on this one. But players to look out for, I think Brady has a big fantasy week. Edelman might have a decent one. Gronk might have a decent one. And maybe even Amendola gets a touchdown as well. So, man, like you can play the whole Patriots offense this week, and I feel like you get pretty good production out of fantasy. For the Colts, if you have Andre Johnson or Frank Gore, maybe look at playing them. That's about it. Now we go to Monday night, and the last game on the list, we have the Giants at the Eagles. I believe that the Giants are going to win this 34-21. I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. Anytime these two play, it seems like it's pretty high-scoring to some degree, but then again, I could be wrong. This could be a mid-20s game. But I think the Giants are clicking. They have a pretty good offense and a pretty good defense. One of those above mediocre teams, I believe. The Eagles have been struggling. Their run game has been relatively abysmal until lately. And, you know, you have Chip Kelly making off-season moves, and that maybe has something to do with chemistry. And then you have the Giants, who have Odell Beckham and Eli Manning, who has been sensational out of nowhere, having just a randomly great season. Fantasy players to watch out for, Eli Manning. Certainly going to give him a nod on this one if you have him as a quarterback and you don't really have another option, definitely play him. Or if it's a close option, I still favor him in some degree. It depends on the other option. I should really do like weekly rankings at each position, but that takes a lot of time to do to really sort out, so I probably won't. But you have, Shane Vereen might be an interesting play, maybe in some flex in 12-man leagues due to the fact that he can catch out of the backfield, but really look for Odell Beckham. Ruben Randall, I believe, is going to play in this one. Larry Donnell, I might stay away from him unless it's a 2 tight end league or something like that, maybe a 12-man. I still think they put on points this game, the Giants, and that's certainly something to look out for. And definitely the Giants running back, I can't even think of his name right now. It's kind of missed my mind. I think it's Bradshaw. I think look out for him. Maybe a touchdown, maybe a lot of yards on the ground. On the other spectrum, we have the Eagles, and there's only one guy I would play realistically, and that's DeMarco Murray. So that is the NFL wrap-up. I believe I've covered every single matchup this week besides Thursday night game. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with soccer. back to the Dyclif Dygest. We're going to be covering soccer in this last segment. First things first, let's talk about Jurgen Klopp replacing Brendan Rodgers. I believe that Brendan Rodgers is actually going to get a job with beIN Sports, which covers Liga and other various soccer activity, which is good for him. But Jurgen Klopp, he's had a successful history at Dortmund, and you know what? I kind of pondered him as a manager for Liverpool, but I'm really starting to understand what he can bring to the table. You know, it really is kind of weird. You can just look at a person and see if they're right for the job. I really think I can just look at Klopp as a person and how he looks. I'm like, that man manages Liverpool. That's what he was meant to do. I don't know. It's just a weird situation. But, you know, Liverpool, not exactly doing what Brendan Rodgers was expected to do to a degree. You know, they're underachieving a little bit. It's not like they're in relegation or anything. But they could certainly be doing better. They're aiming for Champions League qualification. So I think Klopp might be able to get them there. You know, you just kind of have to go through Tottenham and the others that are in that sort of discussion on the table. But it should be interesting to see how the rest of the season shapes up for Klopp and Liverpool. It's just a speculation. I'm not a Liverpool fan myself, but, you know, I like to see them do well. I like to see really anybody do well in a new position or anything like that. It's, you know, you really don't want to root against somebody. I never really do that. But next we have Jurgen Klinsmann, his job maybe being at stake here. You have back-to-back losses against Mexico and Costa Rica. And, you know, I don't really know what's wrong here. Like, I don't know if there's some sort of miscommunication. You have the reports with Fabian Johnson and how that could be one thing that's involved with the situation. Maybe chemistry isn't at its best. Maybe he's not putting the best players that he possibly can on the field. Maybe he's made some questionable decisions. Personally, I don't know what it is. I don't know if the team is just not all there right now or what. But they've proven to me in the World Cup that they are certainly there when it comes to moving on and taking the next step. But now you have this sort of minor setback. Maybe, and this is just my mindset, maybe it's the season, like maybe the MLS season, Premier League season, Bundesliga season, whatever division of play that you're in, maybe these players are slightly affected by that. I know you can say that for other nations as well, but maybe their mind isn't on their nation exactly, and maybe that message needs to be sent and made clear to the team. I'm not sure, but Jurgen Klinsmann's job might be at stake here over the next couple of weeks, months. I really don't know if it'd be beneficial to get a new manager at this point because of his recent success in the World Cup and recent wins. You know, it's just one of those things that's a judgment call to make, and I don't know exactly what the outcome of this will be, but hopefully in the coming weeks and months we'll see what happens with United States soccer and if it can move forward with or without Jurgen Klinsmann. And our last story of the podcast is Sepp Blatter and various other FIFA members being suspended. So this is the first step in understanding what FIFA has to do to correct the wrongdoings that have happened in the past with their federation or association, whatever you want to call it. To me, I've not done enough background research to make a necessary judgment call on this in terms of exactly what has happened with Sepp Blatter and the others, but there has certainly been some sort of wrongdoing in FIFA, whether it be match fixing or bids for the World Cup and taking different kind of bribes. It's all that kind of ridiculous politics has happened to some degree. I think that investigations over time will definitely prove that. I believe that it's already in the process of proving some. And, I didn't really say anything about the time where Blatter was doing an interview and someone just dumped cash, like literally all over. I think it was fake cash, but either way, that's just like a sign of greed and whatnot, and what kind of problem this really is, whether or not how involved Blatter was in this. I think you have to know what's going on within your federation or group as a president, and you really have to put your foot down and make the right hiring and firings to really mold a great association. And it's weird to think, like, if you take a look at other associations and their power, it's kind of limited. There's player unions and stuff. And where FIFA is so diverse and it covers such a wide spectrum of the world, it really is kind of crazy how much power one organization can have that affects literally so many people in the world. Just sit back and think about how many teams, players, and just staff in general is affected by one organization. It honestly is amazing to me that this one organization has this much power. I don't know whether or not it should be broke up into sectors for maybe, let's say, continental FIFA sections, or maybe you have a CONCACAF and maybe a European, an EPL type deal. I don't know. Maybe break it down like that. Maybe you don't. Or maybe there just flat out needs to be a new person holding the crown, so to say, holding the throne as president. And to who would be the right person to hire, I'm not quite sure at this point. People are always saying Ryan Giggs, which, maybe. He's had a good history as a player and a good history as a brief time as a manager. Whether or not he can be president of FIFA is another question, but it's just a suggestion from other people. I don't know. It really has to be the right man for the job. It's almost as important globally who is president of FIFA over president of the United States. Like, if you're talking about globally, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but it's there. Like, it's knocking on the door of that importance because of how many people it affects and how many countries and nations that it actually affects. So, I'll leave you with that. Really, really think about the direction of FIFA and where it should go, where it is now, and who should come into play to improve the situation. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys have enjoyed. And as always, have a nice day.